Thank you for the introduction. I'm Ross Finman, AR Strategy Lead at Niantic, and today I want to talk about the path to selling 1 million consumer head-mounted displays, something that should be of interest to the AWE community. Now, this talk is not just about the vision of it and what the world looks like with head-mounted displays, but more tactically about focusing on how do we get there and what can we do today. In this talk, I'll go over what Niantic's current position is, what are we doing in the headset market, and how we can work with others towards achieving this end goal of 1 million headsets. So, like right now, all of us at AWE, this is quite an exciting time in AR. We have seen immense investment into AR, and it is really starting to pay off over the last decade. There's been amazing potential for replacing mobile phones, for replacing all physical screens with AR screens, even AR video conferencing, which is especially important today. We have some initial devices out there and we can see all this potential, and it always just feels like it's just about to take off. But for many of us who've been in the AR for a while now, this hockey stick ramp up of sales and this kind of promise of the future always seems to shift. So every 12 months, it seems like this hockey stick moves over by 10 to 11 months. Again, this is not a lack of investment. There are already billions of dollars being put behind some of the smartest people in the world trying to make this new computing platform possible. It's just that bringing computers into the real world, dealing with all the real world problems, is very, very hard. So let's go into what are the limiting factors today. Historically, the technology has been the limiting factor. AR is pushing against the laws of physics. And really, the physics doesn't bend to venture capitalist desires. Personally, I think that a lot of the devices released over the past year have made fantastic progress, even in the result of the difficulties with some of the underlying physics. But say the technology was all done. Even then, like you're still not done with the final problem. What are the first applications? Who are the first developers to build them? How do we know if consumers will even want them once we've made this perfect AR headset with all the applications? The decision tree of possibilities across both the technology and the applications is immense and complicated. So we at Niantic, we want to speed this up, particularly the hardware or the head-mounted display iteration cycle we view as a little bit too slow on connecting the technology, which is being developed significantly, but connecting that to the consumers and applications. For example, in the gaming world, like Tetris launched in the 80s, sold hundreds of millions of copies, really wasn't too complicated. As we build out AR, and like for killer apps like Tetris was, and for Game Boy and other systems beforehand, does AR Tetris need color? Does it need eye tracking? Does it need multifocal optics? Maybe. And to be honest, like we don't really know, which is why we want to start iterating with consumers to get the answers to these questions. Now, to dive into this, I want to first give an overview of Niantic's position. And just as a disclaimer, this may start initially to sound like promotional material for Niantic, but if you bear with me, each slide is actually directly relevant to what we are doing with headsets today. So first, Niantic is obviously most known for its content, from the cult classic of Ingress, where people literally get second jobs to hire bush planes to fly in Alaska, to complete missions, to worldwide sensations like Pokémon Go, which is one of the only games in history where you can ask almost anyone in the world, where were you when Pokémon Go launched? And they have an answer. So to massive worldwide IPs like Harry Potter, we work with some of the best AR and location-based content in the world and have much more to come. Sadly, won't be announcing that in this talk right here. And for partners, like we look at partners far beyond just games. We work with a wide range of companies across the world who believe that AR should go to the masses and should be at a planet scale level. We announced late last year that we're working with Qualcomm on building augmented reality glasses with them. We have many more partners in this domain, and we'll be excited to announce those soon. But getting into an area that people here might not know about, you'll be surprised to know, is Niantic has large-scale live events all around the world. Tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people attend these individual events. Like this photo here, for example, is from Germany with over 85,000 people who attended in Dortmund. This is absolutely fantastic and at a scale that most people don't really appreciate. To put that into perspective, like one of my favorite artists, Taylor Swift's most recent and successful world tour in 2018, she had nearly 2.9 million attendees. This was record-breaking for her and is really big for one of the biggest artists in the world. So that's pretty impressive. But again, put it in perspective, Niantic, we beat that. It wasn't clear to give the exact number, but in a normal year, we beat Taylor Swift. I'm quite proud of that, to be honest. Mobile game brought that many people together all around the world. That's really fantastic. One thing I do want to highlight, this is what Niantic does in a normal year. We all know that 2020 is not a normal year, and we've all been taking the necessary precautions and proactively rescheduling some of these events during the pandemic. And we're eagerly hoping and listening to some of the health officials for a quick recovery, and we'll restart when it is safe. But getting back to the events that we've run in the past, and will run in the future, the people attending them can spend upwards of $1,000, sometimes even more if they fly in from overseas. In total last year, Niantic drove nearly $250 million in tourism revenue. And that is all just for a mobile game that people download on an app on their phone. Like bringing that much money and that much people together. Again, this is just for entertainment purposes. We really think that this is a big boom for both local communities, but can also benefit the hardware industry longer term. And then at these live events, people meet others, they share experiences, all like with organic word of mouth happening all the time. Having gone to these events, they're really fantastic. It's just you meet people, it's very open and communicative. But when I started on this, I promised you that this wasn't just Niantic promotional material, and that it actually relates to head-mounted displays. So one thing, if you take a note of this image, you look closer, what do you see? Most of these players out there already tether their phones. The content is so compelling that the players actually adapted to the inconveniences of low battery life on phones and actually not just downloaded the app, did that burden, but then went out to a store, bought a battery pack, carried that battery pack around with them, plugged it into their phone, tethered it. Some people even make special backpacks to just play more. Like people are willing to go above and beyond than even just playing and downloading an app on their phone if the content is compelling enough. And some even go beyond just a single tether. I love this guy. 70 years old, this guy built a whole rig himself so that he could play more. I actually count about a dozen phones that he's playing on. I'm not even sure exactly how you play Pokemon Go with a dozen phones, but this guy does. And like, that's awesome. And actually what's even better is if you look closer, he actually hangs his umbrella on the tethered cables. The tethered cables are so thick that he can actually hang an umbrella on there as he goes around to make sure that he doesn't get wet as he's playing off of his 12 phones on a rig that he built himself. Like, that is dedication. But humor aside, this brings us to an already known fact. Content is king. With the right content, amazing things can happen. People are willing to go above and beyond what we would consider normal people should do. And really, it's content that drives most device adoption. It's not if you build it, they will come. But if you build it and you supply the right content, then that can provide a major boost for different devices. And that's how a lot of gaming consoles, even gaming PCs and other devices really reach adoption. So let's talk about how we tie all these things together. Talk about Niantic's position. And we want to bring together our AR content, our live events, and really connect that to the core users who, again, spend upwards of $1,000 attending them, already tether their phones, and already are used to playing with AR. So this is the best content with the core customers that the AR market should want to work with and get feedback from. So what we are doing is beginning to make a program that adds kind of an AR playground or an AR arcade, if you use VR terminology, to our live events so that customers can try new devices and give feedback on what they think. We do these live events at scale already, but now we want to bring head-mounted displays to them. So in each one of these tents, you could have a head-mounted display that people can try out for the first time. And the nice thing is this benefits not just the hardware and providing feedback with our customers, but these consumers have novel, fun experiences that they can remember forever. And we hope that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people have their first head-mounted display experience at these Niantic events. And we have the scale in which to do it. So the goal for us with this new program is to iterate the hardware with these key potential customers. We want to answer questions like, what is socially acceptable? What field of view is usable? Is it horizontal field of view? Is it vertical field of view? Are green pixels sufficient? Is it different between Germany versus Taiwan in terms of who will adopt it? We want to get to the point where by the end of these events, the consumers do not want to give back the headset. And if it gets to the point that they're willing to pass on it, we can try again at the next live event that we host. So you can iterate very quickly with these customers. And of course, we want to make this fun and safe and open to all. But now getting into the details, like for the collaboration, we want to work with as many companies as possible, at least the ones that are interested in actually testing this out for consumers. We can potentially help with the content and the software platform that supports it underneath, live event booths, mass user survey results, figure out what people are talking about. We're even doing funding for reference designs and prototypes. So for the startup companies out there that are super excited about, hearing the word funding, we will have different stages and kind of quality check benchmarks before we reach this at scale, but we're willing to work with you on that. So what we are looking forward to work with are full headset manufacturers, especially component suppliers, getting down into the details there. We're even looking to work with different experts or startups in the space who have head-mounted products or questions they'd like to test with consumers. So one of the big opportunities here is, what are the first 10 questions you can ask like the first 250,000 people who are trying out a head-mounted experience for the first time in their lives? Like, there's a lot of information that we can gather out there so we can make the things that consumers want. But further, I want to emphasize that this is not just for full headsets. We don't want to just order something in a box. We're willing to work down into the low levels of the glass, the silicon, the cameras, and many more of the difficult problems underneath, because we want to figure out where are the limits of the technology, how can our software help that, and how can we make the content connected to the technology underneath. So to summarize, we are working on a path to selling 1 million consumer AR headsets by connecting the applications, the technology, and the consumers at scale. If you're interested in joining us, please email us at hmd@nianticlabs.com. And together, hopefully we can make the world a more engaging and useful place. Thank you very much.
Hey, all right. Thank you, Ross, for that really amazing talk. That was really interesting to see that Niantic events are outperforming Taylor Swift in terms of attendees. That's a pretty interesting data point right there.
Someone who's followed her for many, many years. I mean, I was like, wow, we beat her? And I'm like, yes, okay. And then I finally said, I can finally say that externally now.
Yeah, yeah. So real quick, we're coming towards the end of our time here at the XR enablement track here at AWE Online 2020. I wanted to ask you, where do you think that we're at? We heard a lot today about hardware. We heard a lot about software. Now we started to hear more about content. Where do you think we're at as far as this equilibrium goes between content and hardware accessibility? And on the road to mass adoption, like where do we really need to step up that game in order to start seeing more and more people adopting these types of technologies in their day-to-day lives?
I think that the technology today is, I mean, there's still a ways to go before we like have the contact lenses or the eyeglasses that we go in that we all imagine there. But if you think about like the connecting the content, the technology now, so I actually think that there's some of the content experiences that are out there. There's some of the technology that's like just barely getting to that level. So as I said, like if you want to do Tetris, which sold 200 million copies or over that over the last like 2-3 decades, like that doesn't need multifocal, that doesn't need color, like there's different trade-offs that you can do to match the content to the technology. And I view that there is still a disconnect in the AR space today. So personally, I believe that there is some technology components out there today that can match some compelling content experiences. And that's one of the reasons why we're very excited to try and connect those together. Because like personally, as I've gone into the headset space and you figure out green pixels are easy, but red pixels, oh my God, it's so terrible. But a game designer doesn't fully realize that. So then the content, if it's green only, then maybe that changes the game. So like we want to help bridge that gap and be hopefully a conduit to connect to the end customers. So I think the
Yeah.
technology could be almost there today with what we have if we get the knowledge across the board, and then that can help get us a foothold as we get to larger scale adoption.
Do you think that having these large scale events where people come and they start using this technology in a live multi user setting while being also immersed in the alternative reality, do you think that is going to promote adoption of people to use the technology by themselves and explore other types of realities where they're not necessarily surrounded by 2.9 million people?
I think that it's a start. So as I said, it's the path to a million AR headsets. So then if you have like millions of people that say, oh no, I want this now, then you can get kind of other content and experiences go up from there. So I'm not saying that we have like, hey, like by this date, then we're going to sell like these 10 million headsets in a sense, but we want to get that iteration cycle down so then we know, because right now, I, I mean, I won't go so far to say that there isn't content or hardware out there that can drive that. It hasn't shown itself in the numbers yet. But if we can solve that at the live events, then that helps us immensely with the end consumers, because Niantic, we have a lot of what we consider to be answers, but I mean, the best way to do that is to test it with the consumers and see what they like. And then like, if they're like, oh, I like this and not that, and like, and if you want apples, no oranges, then you can know that that can help in the decision tree. So like, this is really to help fuel in information into the content space, into the hardware space, and then get consumers educated. Like Karen, she gave a great talk earlier that, hey, you need to educate people on AR. We can do that with like the core consumers at a massive scale on a yearly basis, and then do that all around the world. So then when the right content, the right hardware all comes together, like we already have a lot of the consumers that are aware of it. So it's one less hurdle to go over. So again, we just want to speed up the cycle. Like I imagine Niantic should bring AR to consumers 2 years faster than if Niantic wasn't in the market. And with Pokemon Go bringing mass awareness and everyone in the world now knowing AR, partially as a result of Pokemon Go, already made kind of strides towards that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. Ross Finman from Niantic, thank you so much for hanging out. There are some additional questions in the chat on the side of the streaming video, so hopefully you have a chance to continue to engage with the audience there. If you want to continue to be in touch with Ross, you saw his email address on there. If you want to work with Niantic, you can also find him on social media. I'm sure those links are on his profile there. And Ross, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Take care.